Discover the Arts is brought to you by Nevada Dairymen and Dairy Council of Nevada and Estelle J. Kelsey Foundation.
Hi, my name is Chad Sweet. I'm the Technical Director and Production Manager here at Reno Little Theater here in Reno, Nevada. And today we're going to talk a little bit about technical theater and our home here at 147 East Pueblo Street, just off of Wells. This room that we're in right now is part of our building, and this is our theatrical space, our performance space. It is a black box theater. This building itself was opened in 2011 specifically for this purpose, which is really nice to have a building built just for theater instead of trying to retrofit something, although that can be fun too. Previous to that, Reno Little Theater was homeless for a little while, played at different high schools and Elks Lodges and things like that. Previous to that, there was a home on Sierra Street downtown. And then previous to that, the Reno Little Theater was founded in 1935 by Ed Semenza and was housed at the university, which is really interesting stuff. But since we're here in this new building just for us, we'll take a tour through all the different spaces and what we do technically here. So our room here, and I don't know how much of it you can see at home. You see some seats behind me. This is what's called a black box theater. And so you may or may not see black walls. It might just be a black hole. But beyond those walls is kind of nothing. We do have the rest of the building that way, but that's not connected to the performance space itself. So really it's just wall-to-wall performance space. Black box theaters are generally set up to be flexible spaces where you can change how the seating is oriented, where you can change where the stage itself is, where the performers perform. And our space for a couple of years right in the beginning was pretty flexible. Then we sort of landed in what's called a three-quarter thrust, where we had a long bit of playing space against the back wall, and then we had a little bit of a thrust that came out with seating on three sides of it. And we had that up until July of 2019. And then we decided we wanted to change up the seating a little bit. We wanted to increase capacity. We went from about 98 seats when I first came on board in 2014, to about 108 seats. And then when we got this new seating system in, these seats are, we have 142 here. So that increased our capacity by a lot. And one of the biggest reasons for that is we were selling out a lot of shows, which was a fantastic problem to have. But we were also selling out a lot of performances to our partner organizations, whether that's Ageless Repertory Theater or Latino Arte or the RGJ or the Love of Jazz. And so a lot of our partners weren't able to fit all of the audience members that they wanted to fit in here either. So we were hoping we could get more of our community in here to help support more of our artistic community. So we put this seating system in September of 2019. And this was specifically manufactured for us. The company is Master Industry, and they're out of France. So this was all built in France and Europe, and then shipped over. And then they had a couple of guys come over, one of them from Canada, one of them from France, and over the course of about a week, they installed this system. It's motorized, all the seats fold down. This allows us to present in a proscenium fashion. So proscenium is what most people are familiar with. Generally speaking, you've got a box and then, or a picture frame, and then you see the action inside that picture frame. If you've been to the Pioneer Theater here in downtown Reno, that's a proscenium theater. So this allows us to do that and get a great many people in our space, a great many, 142. That's a great many for us. But what it also allows us to do, because it's collapsible, we can collapse this riser system, get rid of these seats, and then if we want to rebuild a thrust seating arrangement like we had previously, we can do that. If we want to do in the round, we can do that. And that allows us to be really flexible and yet still have increased capacity, which is why we invested in this seating system. Beyond that, the floor in our theater is pretty interesting. It is a floating floor or a sprung floor, which means on the top we've got a hardboard or masonite. We actually have 2 layers of that at a 1/4 inch thick. And then below that we have 2 3/4 inch sheets of plywood, layers of that. And then underneath that, we've got 2x6 sleepers is what they're called. So it's a 2x6 board, but it's on its side. And so, and that's all on top of poured concrete. So the floor itself is pretty forgiving. It has a good bounce to it if you have dancing or jumping or anything like that, instead of performing on concrete, which is what they actually did for the first few shows here at Reno Little Theater before they could finish the floor. So that's, it's a good floor that way. Up in our grid, we have a static lighting grid. That means that all of our pipes are just hung up there, dead hung up in the air. And for us to get up and manipulate our lights, we have to get into a scissor lift. Our scissor lift is affectionately known as Violet, and she is our best friend here at the theater. A mascot, you might say. And so we go up in Violet, and then we can manipulate our lights up in the grid. We have a mix of traditional incandescent or HID, high intensity discharge lamps in the air. Most of our traditional lighting instruments are Source 4 LECOs. They have a long barrel on them. They have a lens on them, and you can change the lens type, 50 degree, 36 degree, 26, 19, and some others on either end. You put Gobos in them, that sort of thing. And they usually run on either a 575 watt bulb or a 750 watt bulb. So we have about 25 of those, and those are really great for really defining spaces on the stage. They're also really great for spotlights. They have a lovely warm temperature unless you gel them. Gel is a little translucent piece of plastic that can be any type of color. But if you don't want to do that and you want to change color, like green for instance, what we also have, the other half, probably a little bit more than half now, we have LED instruments. And most of them, we have several LED PARs, and those are color changing. They're RGBW, which means they have red, green, and blue, as well as white LED nodes in them. We also have some LED strip lights that can light our back wall or our cyc, or just do stage washes or wall washes. And most of those are RGBW that we have. And then we also have some moving lights, some smart lights. We have 6 that have high intensity discharge lamps in them, and those are 330 watt bulbs in those. But then we also just recently purchased a couple of LED moving lights. We have 2 very small ones actually that we've had for a while. And those are a lot of fun because those, not only do they change color, but you can also change the zoom on them. So your beam can be tight and small. I think it goes down to 7 degrees, or it can be wide and diffuse, so the edges, you don't really see the edges. And that's what we've got going on the seats behind me. And that's about a 55 degree spread there. But then we also just recently purchased 3 pretty high-end LED hybrid lights that can go from spot to wash. And those ones, the LEDs are actually 310 watt, which LEDs, their wattage, as some of you may know, if you change out an LED bulb in your house, you can get a 5 watt LED bulb that equals a 60 watt incandescent bulb. So these 310 watt LEDs moving lights are a lot brighter than any of the lights that we have in our rig. And then we have a few other little specialty lights. We've got some little tiny pars that are really bright and diffuse. They don't change focus or zoom. Oh, the other great thing about the moving lights too is a lot of them come with gobos in them, so you can put different patterns in front of the light. So you can make it look like a forest, or you can make it look like a city breakup, geometric, that sort of thing. Or you can do some fun stuff where you have a gobo and then you can change our most recent ones, the 310 watt ones. You can do half colors because they have color flags instead of color nodes. And so you do like half green and half blue, and you can also put a prism in there and you can rotate the prism, and it gets pretty funky and fresh in here when that happens. So one of the things that's really that you really have to think about when you design a set to perform in a black box theater is a black box doesn't technically have any backstage. And so when I design a set, and I design most of the sets here, I have to think about where are the actors going to go when they leave the playing area. And so a lot of times our sets have to be 3 foot or so off the back wall, so when people go off stage right, they could then cross behind the set and go back to the dressing room. So that's one of the interesting things you got to think about. Sight lines, which when you've got an audience that's this wide, almost as wide as the entire house, and they're also on a curve, sight lines can get really tricky going off to the sides on a set. When you open a door, you don't want to see backstage. You want to make sure that you're masking all of that. So here we are in the dressing room at Reno Little Theater. The dressing room, as you can see, goes on forever, but it's actually quite a large dressing room for a community theater of our size. And it's communal, so everybody's in here and we all hang out and sort of bond as a cast. We have had up to, I think our biggest show in here was 20. Funny thing happened on the way to the Forum, which was in the summer of 2019. And it was packed. It was wall-to-wall people, which can be a whole lot of fun. Actors are a whole lot of fun to hang out with, certainly. But what usually happens is we'll have in the center of the room racks of costumes. That sort of divides the room in half. And then each actor sort of picks out a spot. We have our vanity lights up top so people can do their makeup, do their hair, that sort of thing. We've got everything people could need. We've got irons, we've got steamers, we've got to get the smell, because when you're acting on stage, you can get sweaty and smelly. And sometimes you can't wash the clothes all the time, either because you don't have time if you're doing a double show, or a lot of the times costumes are vintage or handmade, and so you can't just throw them into the washer. And so you use a combo of water and vodka. One spritz for the costume, one spritz for yourself, or not. And then we also have other things here in the dressing room. We have a lovely station that our operations manager, Victoria, set up that has tea and cookies and coffee and water and snacks of all sorts. We like to make sure our actors are well fed and hydrated, and also caffeinated if they need that sort of thing. And then also in our little building here, we try to make good use of almost all the space that we have. And so just to the left of me, there's a little alcove that actually goes underneath some stairs that go up to the second floor. And in the alcove, which most buildings is usually closed off, I actually have all my lighting storage in there. So I have all my extension cords and safety cables and DMX cables and extra lights that aren't hanging in the grid. Although much of the time I have to store, especially my bigger lights, up in the grid because I just don't have room on the ground to store them. And then we've got gels and gobos and frames and all that stuff back there. And some practical lights, some wall sconces and exit signs and ceiling lights. All those are sort of screwed to the wall back there. And then just beyond that, there's another room that goes back, and that room actually has our flats and platforms. For those of you that don't know, a flat is a wall in theater. So there are generally two types of flats. There's a Hollywood flat, which is what we use, even though we're in theater. A Hollywood flat is usually made out of 1x3 or 1x4, and the board is on end like that, and so it creates a deep frame. And then the panel, whether you're using Luan or Masonite or something like that, goes on the ends of that 1x4 or 1x3. A theatrical flat is actually the opposite way, where the rails are actually on their sides, and so it creates a very thin profile. And then the facing gets put on the long bit of the rail. And then those get stood up, and either they are booked together, so they two flats might create an angle, so they stand up, and then you put stage. We don't generally build flats that way, just because it's usually easier and quicker for us to put a Hollywood flat up, and it's got a wide bottom, so then we can just screw it into the deck of the stage, and that helps us lay everything out. So that's what flats are. We also have platforms back here. A platform is anything that you would stand on stage that raises you up from the deck itself. And most of our platforms are made out of either 1x6 or 2x6 with 3/4 inch plywood on top of that. And those are glued and screwed in together. And platforms should last for a while. Flats generally last for a while. Sometimes you got to give them a little love, a little care, a little attention, some tape, some putty, some spackle, a little sand every now and again. Some that we're using that were built by a company that from Carson City that I think went out of business more than 20 years ago. So they can last for a long time if they're well built. We also have back in that room, we have our step units are back there. A lot of times theaters will build staircases or step units, and it'll be a whole big thing, and then you've got to store this 3 or 4 foot tall unit that's 3 feet wide or whatever. You got to figure out where to store that. What I like to do usually is build a box, a step box, that's 8 inches tall by 11 or 12 inches deep, and then attach those boxes together to create a step unit. And that is better for storage, and it's generally pretty quick because you can change the height of your step really easily. You can also change the tread of your step very easily. We also have back there casters. We have a caster wall, and that is a very sexy thing for those that are interested in technical theater design. It's beautiful. And then some other consumables, bolts and nuts and brackets and straps and things like that. Some extra tools are back there as well. We also have a tool cart, or a road box is often what they call it, especially if it's going out on tour, although ours just moves from backstage to onstage. But it's super handy. It has all these slots to put tools in. It has drawers in the front that keeps our staples and some other consumables and tools and tape, and some of our bigger tools are in there, bolt cutters and sanders and all that stuff. So we have some of that storage back here as well. Hey, welcome to the prop shop at Reno Little Theater. We have got everything on these shelves that you could possibly imagine. We've got dishes, we've got typewriters, we've got pictures, we've got sculptures, we've got Coke bottles right here. We've got literally everything on these shelves. In fact, we have so much stuff that we have to clean it just about weekly to get things back where they belong. The great thing about props is that you never know what you're going to need for a show, and you never know when to let go of something or when to keep something after a show. And so it's just sort of a fun thing to figure out, okay, I might use this 6 shows from now, and I don't know what that show is going to be, but I'll save it anyways. But it's a lot of fun to go through this room and figure out what you can use for a show and what you can't. One of the other great things about props is that we have recently moved into the 21st century, and we have started 3D printing a lot of our very special props or scenic elements too. We have 2 3D printers here at Reno Little Theater, and they allow us to do some really cool and intricate things. Take this mask, for instance. This mask was designed for production of The Imaginary Invalid, and I was able to print these. We printed 12 of them, I believe. Each print took 36 hours to do. And then our actors wore them. They got a little stretchy band here. We've got some foam on the inside, a couple eye holes. We had to put a mouth hole in there so we could hear them speak, because that wasn't there and wouldn't be in a traditional plague mask like this is. But now we've got these things, and they're really cool, and if we need something different, we can just put it into design it and put it into the 3D printer, and off we have something new. So now we're in the tech booth at Reno Little Theater, and this is where our stage manager sits and runs the show. We are lucky enough that our control systems for lighting, sound, and video, if we're doing any video, they're all computer-based. And that means, luckily, that we can have one person run all of those things. And we usually have our stage manager, who has been with the rehearsals of the show the whole time and come into our theater with the show. They know the show really well. They're able to run lighting, sound, and video. And so that stage manager sits here. They're able to look out these windows, watch the show. They have a sound monitor so they can hear everything that's happening on stage, if it's very quiet or something like that. And then for our lighting system, we run a software program called CAMSYS, and software-based. So it runs on this computer. We have what's called a cue stack that shows us all of our different cues. That goes up on this monitor so we can see what's happening. And then this is what's called a mini wing here. And so this just has a few faders and a few buttons. Usually we only use one of them, so we'll bring up fader 1, so that's cue stack 1, and then we'll just hit this go button, which is just a play button there. And there are a couple of ways we can actually do that. We can do it for the space bar on the computer itself, or there are some soft buttons on the screen that we can use. The great thing about a software system like this versus what some people might be used to, which is more a board like this that might be really big and have, 50 or 100 or 1,000 sliders on it. This software can control LEDs and moving lights really efficiently. For a lot of the boards that are all sliders, each slider controls a different parameter of the light. So slider 1 might be pan and tilt on or just tilt on a moving light, and the next slider might be pan side to side, and the next slider controls, if it's an LED, it controls the red, and the next slider is blue, and the next slider is green, and so on and so forth. So you can have 21 different sliders or 36 different sliders for one light. For a system like this, we don't need to do that, which is super awesome. You can just grab a light, you select it like that, and you hit locate, and that brings the light up, and then you hit a color. You want it to be white or blue or green or some combination thereof, and then you can go over to the position and you can point it wherever you want to point it, make the beam big or small, and then what I do as the lighting designer and the programmer is once I get the look that I want, I hit record on this, and then I clear it all out. I hit play, make sure that it's doing what I want it to do, and then move on to the next, whatever the next lighting cue might be, and then we create this stack up here. And so that's kind of how our lighting system works. The other thing that we control, one of the other things we control up here is our sound system. And we have we run that through a program called QLab, and that can control sound cues. And it's also great because it has a routing function. So we are connected through a digital interface, and that interface then can output to a bunch of different speakers. So we have two main speakers, and then we have two back of house speakers that can do some fill for our upper rows, as well as start to create some surround sound if we wanted to route a particular sound cue. It doesn't necessarily have to be just stage left or stage right. It can be back house left or back house right, or mains right, mains left. And then our digital interface has 12 output channels. So then I can output if we need a particular speaker on stage, like let's say we want to have a record player playing. That can be really difficult to accomplish practically in and of itself, and have it sound right, or have it play the right cue at the right time, or whatever. So then we can hide a speaker, a little tiny speaker somewhere near that record player, and then our stage manager can hit go on that particular sound cue, and then our digital interface through QLab can tell it to just go to that speaker. And then they also control our video through QLab as well.
Be sure to check out Discover Costume Design if you haven't already. And now, a message from our sponsors.
Discover the Arts is brought to you by Nevada Dairymen and Dairy Council of Nevada and Estelle J. Kelsey Foundation.
All right, so now we're in the costume shop at Reno Little Theater, and we have a great costume stock. We've got costumes from all different periods of time. We've got men's costumes, we've got women's costumes, we've got blouses, we've got suit coats, we've got skirts, we've got super sparkly things, we've got super flowy things, we've got stuff with ribbons, and we've got black robes, and we've got red robes, and we've got green robes, and literally like anything you could ever imagine. We've got uniforms for policemen and uniforms for people in the military, and we've got Santa costumes, and you name it, it's in this room. And if it's not in this room, we've got a whole host of wonderful, beautiful volunteers that help us make our costumes, or go look at different places to buy costumes, whether that's a secondhand store, or whether that's online, or whatever, or from their own closets, they bring it in. And you know, what's so great about a costume shop is that you've got one right in your home. It's called your parents' closet, or maybe it's your own closet. But if I was at my parents' house, I might pick out a sweater like this. This looks like something my mom would wear. And, you know, I'd put this sweater on, and now, I don't know, now I'm ready to go play some pinochle with my gal friends down at the Diner-Aunt, and you know, it would just be a lovely day. And then when I got home, I might take off my shoes and you know, do a little Mr. Rogers action and put some slippers on. And you know, guys, if you go ahead and do this, go into your parents' closet and pull out some clothes and put some fun stuff on. Go ahead and take a picture, or get your mom or your dad to take a picture, and then send that to outreach@artown.org, and you might see your picture online, or in the next video, or maybe you'll be famous after that, or maybe you'll be a costume designer. That's cool too. Thanks everybody for joining me in this backstage tour of Reno Little Theater. We're so happy to be the longest continuously running community theater in Reno, and we're happy to have you guys come join us online at renolittletheater.org, and that's theater with an ER, and check out what we've got going on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter.